Welcome to the Pastured Pig Podcast, where we share the successes and challenges of raising pigs on pasture. We talk to producers all over the country, from small homesteads to large commercial pasture operations. Whether you're new to pastured pigs or have been raising hogs for decades, we hope you hear new ideas and new perspectives on pasturing hogs. Here's your host, Troy McClung.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Pastured Pig Podcast. As Kelly said, I'm your host, Troy McClung. Glad to have another episode back out here. February kind of went by fast and realized that I was about a week behind. So we may double up. In fact, I'll go ahead and tease this now. Our interview for next week's podcast is going to be Walt Jeffries of Sugar Mountain Farm. So I've been anxiously awaiting to get Walt on the podcast and finally have done that. So his discussion interview will be next week. And that way we can have two in February. So look forward to that. Today we're taking the podcast in a different direction, and we'll be talking with Arkolabs about vaccination importance for pastured pigs. But before we get into that, just a couple quick announcements. Obviously, as I always discuss, we have our Patreon account out there. If you all want to consider supporting the podcast, see good continued content as we try to put it together, building the website, some of the features associated with the website, directories, featured farms, all those type of things. Please consider supporting us on Patreon. It'd be simple as $5 a month, and that goes directly back into these efforts here on the podcast and the peripheral media that goes along with it. Also, speaking of our website, we have the website, thepasturedpig.com, and would love to update that more with your information, additional input, blog copy, content, that type of thing. So reach out to me if you would like to be a co-contributor, and we're looking at adding some additional perspectives and additional content from that. Well, one quick announcement is to save the date. This is something that's excited to announce and discuss. But on May 22nd of this year, so May 22nd, 2022, I will be a guest presenter at the Pasture Pig Workshop that is being hosted by Chuck Lewis at Sheridan Park Farms on his farm in North Carolina. So Chuck and his wife have done this last year. This year they're growing a little bit, so they're going to present. They've asked me to come down and present as well. So if you or you know someone who would be interested in looking at the basics of pastured piggery and turning that into a business, then we'll be there for that one-day session discussing things in a classroom setting, but then also out on pasture at his new farm. So save a date. We'll have more details coming. Obviously, there's going to be a finite amount of tickets available, so we can keep an intimate setting there and not overwhelm Chuck's farm. That would not be good. So we'll make more announcements of that as we move forward, and we'll have details on the Pastured Pig website, and then Chuck will have information on his website as well. Okay, so let's come back to Arkolabs. So this is something I have to say I was a little bit reluctant at first to do this discussion, but as I got into it, I really appreciated their perspective. I mean, everybody has a different perspective on animal welfare and what they see as necessary for their herd or their on-farm production. So today in this interview, we're talking with Hans Koink and Paul Skartweet. Some good Scandinavian fellas. I absolutely had a hard time making sure I was pronouncing their names right. So get into conversation with them. There's a lot of resources that you can find at Arkolabs. I'll also put some links in the show description here and some of the things we refer to, and you guys can check all that out. I'd love to get some feedback from this. If you guys maybe go to the Pastured Pig website, use the contact form, maybe give some feedback as to this interview, what you guys think, and I can even share that in upcoming episodes, people that had a certain response or reaction to this. All right, without further ado, we'll get into our discussion.
All right, so I appreciate you all taking the time to come on the podcast, and as we talked about, this kind of a new direction for us, but really want to first, let's start with Arco Laboratories, and if you would give us the genesis of Arco Laboratories, and maybe for those that aren't familiar with it, kind of thread the needle as to why Arco Laboratories is on the Pastured Pig podcast. If you could kind of tie those two together with a little bit of history of the lab.
Sure. Well, thanks for having us on, Troy. We appreciate it, and we're excited to have a chance to talk to all your listeners out there. Arkolabs, this is Dr. Hans Klein, and I'm one of the owners of the company, and just want to give you a little bit of a history of our company. We've been in the vaccine business, the veterinary vaccine business, for just about 35 years now. We started in the 80s as a veterinary clinic, and just kind of your typical veterinary clinic, at least a large animal clinic servicing, our clients in the area, in central Iowa is where we're located. And during that process, as with any veterinary clinic, a lot of times you're called to deal with problems, kind of a fire engine sort of a mentality where something comes up and you try to go out and put out the fire. And along the way and through doing that, and as they say, necessity is the mother of invention, the veterinarians there at the time really were starting to get into the vaccine business and using prevention as a more effective way to try to deal with some of these diseases that a lot of the producers in the immediate area were facing. And so that was really the genesis of Arco Laboratories, born out of a veterinary clinic. And at the time, the regulatory framework for vaccines in veterinary medicine were much more loose, I guess you'd say. It was easier to do. There weren't really nearly as many regulations and as much of a regulatory framework as there is today. And so it allowed for a bit of an ease of entry into the business itself, a lot of flexibility from being able to move from a veterinary clinic into a licensed laboratory where we were actually manufacturing vaccines for mostly our customers. But then in the mid 80s, right around that time, the federal government, the USDA, took over the licensing of all vaccine companies in the United States. And it was kind of perfect timing for Arco, because that was right around the time we were evolving into becoming a larger company anyway. And so it really worked out well for us. It gave us the opportunity to become fully licensed by the USDA. And what that did was it opened up the entire nation to us allowing to provide our vaccine to anybody in the United States. And also some other countries accept the regulatory framework of the U.S. as well, namely Canada, who's very closely related and very easy to trade with, but also some other countries. And so our first product that we brought out was actually a vaccine for turkeys. It was a hemorrhagic enteritis vaccine, which is kind of similar to, it's just very immunosuppressive, kind of like HIV in people, although this certainly does not infect people. It's just specific to turkeys. And so we had come out with a vaccine for that, and that was the beginning of the beginning, I guess I would say, in terms of selling vaccines all over the United States. And that was a very successful product. It's a product that went through the water line, so it's easy to deliver, and the turkeys would just drink it over a 6-hour period. There were no injections, no shots, anything like that. So very easy to deliver on the farm. And after that, really things just went from there. We came out with more new products for turkeys, and then in the 90s, we started seeing the same need for vaccines in swine, and we're developing new products. There's a fair number of consistencies between the turkey market and the swine market. There's actually about 200 million turkeys raised every year in the U.S. and about 200 million pigs, and so the market's about the same size. People tend to like to give vaccines through the water for swine as well, just because it's easier to do. No injections, and so and then it's just gone from there. And we've always focused, as compared to some of the larger companies, the publicly traded companies, and I think we're one of the only privately owned companies out there that makes vaccines for animals, but we're one of the few that's been around for any period of time anyway. We really focused on agriculture because those were our roots. And so even today, we really only make vaccines for pigs and poultry. We expanded into chickens, but we're really, really focused. We're private, we're small, we're very nimble, and we're proud of that heritage. And when we started, there were lots and lots of customers that were raising pigs on range, in the huts, and I remember working in those areas as well, and so we're kind of coming back to our roots here too a little bit on this podcast, but we see, we obviously see that as something that's coming full circle again, with some of the customer demands that are out there, and the restaurants, and people want a variety of things in their food. And so that's how we got here today was, interest in that group or that demographic of folks that are out there raising pigs that way. And so, I think maybe that gets us from A to B at least.
Yeah.
Troy. So,
that was great. I appreciate that. So there's one thing, and again, that if anybody listens to the podcast, they know I'm notorious for rabbit trails here. But so you said something that I find interesting. I would assume, and you kind of answered the question, in my mind, I'm assuming, okay, Arko Laboratories working specifically in ag, this has to be some sort of subsidiary of something larger, because why would you have a laboratory and just be focusing on specific ag and specific species within that ag, when I'm sure a lot of that stuff the lab could translate over to so many other markets. There'd be a ton of vertical market opportunity there. But you can't answer that question. You guys are staying specifically in ag as a business model by design.
Yes, it's our niche, really. I mean, I think it's, you can, I think you have a choice in business, and we all do. You can really try to become big and but that involves sometimes that involves trying to be all things to all people. And especially in the veterinary side where, there's several different species, and of course to the large publicly traded companies, or even the large privately held, which are very corporate in their nature, so they operate very similar to publicly traded companies. Their focus has become small animal and companion animal because they're following the money, basically. That's how they operate, and their investors and their shareholders demand that. For us as a private company, our ownership is very concentrated. We're not, in terms of what we focus on, I guess we don't have those sorts of diversions to pull us away from that. And we feel like it's a way to stay with our roots. We love agriculture. We love the people in agriculture. It's a great industry to work in. And I think there's something to be said for that in terms of just being able to be a part of that. And we really want to, one of our focuses is to make things better for our industry, to make things easier, to make things more customer friendly, to make our entire industry more attractive to the end consumer, the people that are out there that are supporting our industry, or the people that are eating the pork sandwich, or whatever it might be. And so yeah, I think we're lucky that we're able to do that, but at the same time, it is by design as well.
Yeah, excellent, good deal. So one thing you said there, and I appreciate how you tied it back to saying, kind of getting back to your roots, because back in the 80s, you're dealing with local farmers that were raising pigs on range or on pasture or out in the open. So I would assume over the decades, that's kind of evolved. You're in Iowa. We know there's very large production facilities there, what we'd call confinement operations. And it's funny, across the spectrum of how people raise pigs, you have the pendulum swing both sides, that some people can be very dogmatic about a certain way they raise their animals, and other people are on the opposite side. So in your experience, what is the application or the fit for the vaccines that Arko Laboratories creates specifically for swine when it comes to confinement operations that are obviously much larger, tighter square footage, that type of stuff, more controlled environment versus something on pasture? And I'll let you, it's kind of a two-part question, but I'll let you start there, and then we'll jump in with part B there.
Okay. Yeah. The interesting thing about outdoor and pasture type husbandry is that, yeah, you're correct, that it's more of an open air environment. There's there's probably less nose to nose interaction, definitely less chance for that. And so a lot of times in those cases, the respiratory diseases might not be as big of an issue. There are, on the flip side of that, the pasture raised animal is more exposed to the environment. And so there's the geese that, feed brings in all kinds of things.
Sure.
So there's all kinds of scavengers out there looking for a free meal, so to speak. And so they come into contact with more animals that are of different species that can carry diseases. One example, and Paul's going to give you more detail on some of the products, but one example is erysipelas. Erysipelas is an organism that can live in the soil for up to 6 months. It's very good at it. And so some of these things really, really thrive. Some of these disease organisms really thrive in a non-confinement sort of a scenario, and some don't. And so there's the good and the bad of both schemes, I think, in terms of raising pigs, and they come with their own unique disease sorts of exposure. So yeah, but I think our products are very well positioned to help the producer who's raising pigs on pasture. Yeah. Most of our products go through the water line, or all of them do. That's one of the things that actually that's more universal, but the great thing about products that are given orally, not only are they easy to administer, especially to large groups, but even in small groups, what is something that people don't realize, I think, is that the immune system, which is basically the way that we fight off disease in our bodies, when we get COVID vaccines or whatever, that sets off the immune system. It's a protective mechanism that humans have, pigs, all animals have. But 70% of that immune system, a full 70% of that, is located in the gut. Your gut is just made up to be a barrier to disease, to keep you from being exposed. The rest of the system, think of it as a shield from letting disease get into the rest of the system. And so when we apply these vaccines to the gut, we actually get what I think is a much more robust response to the vaccines and much more protection. And so that's one of the reasons that we've stuck with that sort of a strategy in terms of vaccines, because we think it's more effective. There's more resources there to tap in that pig's gut, and it also makes it easier to vaccinate if we're going through a water system or whatever it might be. So yeah, I think that's, and I'm getting off on a bit of a tangent there. I'm sorry, but
no, that's fine.
Yeah, I think there's something to be said for raising on pasture. There's something to be said for raising in confinement. The diseases might be similar in some cases, might be different in others, but yeah, I think it's great to have choice. The consumer wants choice,
right?
And I think as an industry, we're giving it to them, and that's what we need to do. So. Yeah, appreciate that question.
Yeah, no, and I appreciate the answer. And I know, my goodness, yeah, there's so many tentacles from that. I know Paul's going to talk about the specific products here in a second, and maybe we table this, but and talk about more of the waterline distribution, how dosing through water, the controls of that versus injectable. But you made a point there that to me is kind of one of those aha moments. And for those guys listening in the pre-screening, I told both Paul and Hans to talk to me kind of like I'm a high schooler, because I really don't fully understand the disease in pigs. You've fortunately been able to dodge it on our farm for quite a while. So you said something there that to me almost seems counterintuitive. It kind of rubs against what I had been taught in college biology or whatever. So this idea that oral vaccination over injected vaccination, there's a benefit there. And I really loved how you defined that, or how you described that. So I think a lot of us that listen would think, it's always been my approach when something simple as worming my pigs. It's like, well, I'm definitely going to go with the injectable. It's always going to be more, it's more potent, or it's more effective. And obviously it's more of a pain in the butt to do, especially with pigs out on pasture, as you got to corral them and go through and inject. And so I appreciate that. And if there's any more details you could add to that, or even a couple other comments about that, I would appreciate that. I think that would be good for all of us to hear.
Sure. Yeah. The way I describe it is, I mean, if you take a gut, and this might be a little bit morbid, but as a veterinarian, the discussions I have around my dinner table are very different than probably some other people's.
Sure.
Yeah. So, but it doesn't seem to keep me from gaining weight. But I still, but the gut itself, if you string it out, I don't know how long you've just got miles. It's endless amounts of tissue there. That's all kind of bunched up in your abdominal cavity, and so the way I described it is, it's just a football field of immune cells. I mean, there's tons of these. It's called gut-associated lymphatic tissue. I think that's a kind of a $1 million phrase, but GALT is what we call it, GALT, and that's where all those immune cells are. And so when we stick a vaccine in there, they just go crazy and they start producing antibodies and, things that protect us against disease. And the great thing about the gut is there's just tons of it there. There's tons of it. And it does translate over and protect other parts. It's not just protecting the gut. You can stimulate other parts of the immune system that way too. And so I don't know if that answers your question or not, but that is the basics of it, is that it's when you inject something into an area, you're competing for just a very small little area, of immune cells under the skin. And they're really, the vaccine's kind of fighting for that. And so when you get into the gut, there's so many immune cells there that you'll never overwhelm it. You'll never get shortchanged on how much response you get. And so we really like that from the standpoint. And moving forward, I think on the confinement side, we're going to get bigger and bigger, and there's going to be less. And with labor now, it's very difficult. Everybody knows how tight labor is right now.
Right.
It's hard to get people to go through and inject a whole bunch of pigs. when you could alternatively just run it through the water line for 6 hours and be done with it. I think there's two advantages. One is the labor, but the other is really just how well it works and the theory behind it.
Yeah, so it sounds like the efficacy when it comes to oral is still just as solid, if not more solid. So it kind of dispels maybe what was an incorrect thought in my mind that, well, the efficacy of an oral administration of anything is always going to be less than injected. So that's good. It's good stuff.
Yes.
So swing the gate back around here to catch part two of my question, and we were talking a little bit about confinement versus pasture. So the part two of that question was, what do you see from your guys' perspective? What do you see is maybe the most dominant or the most concerning disease for a pastured operation, and is it the same for a confinement operation? Is it this is the leader, or these are the leaders, or we got to watch out for everything? What are you seeing in comparison to those two?
Well, from my perspective, the things that there are a few things that keep me up at night. One is the biosecurity of a pasture sort of an operation. There's certainly not to say it's inferior in any way, shape, or form. It just creates different challenges. Like back in the day when pseudorabies was a problem, you could see it just moving up and down the riverbeds, because it was those animals that were moving up and down the riverbeds that were carrying it. And that's a lot of times that's how it would spread. Now, pseudorabies obviously today has been largely eradicated, although I did see an article just recently, I think today, where they had detected it somewhere in the United States in feral pigs, but so we don't have near the feral pig problem that some countries do, like China and even some countries in Eastern Europe. But we do have to watch out for that sort of thing, just especially as everybody's heard of African swine fever, not only in the pig industry, but I think I was just coming into the country a few days ago, and when we come through customs, there was a big poster there about it. So the USDA has done a really nice job of keeping people aware of African swine fever and how big of a problem it would be if it came into the United States for it just shuts off trading. We can't trade anymore until we get it under control. So the other things on pasture, erysipelas is one I think that we see more. The salmonella, I think E. coli is kind of universal. It's everywhere. Ileitis, I think there's still some of that on the pasture end, but but the respiratory side of it, which is really a killer, I think in some of the large confinement operations. I guess we don't see that as quite a big of a problem in pasture type animals, but the things that are spread by wildlife, like some of these organisms that are carried by a lot of different species, those are the things that I think you can run into, and those are the products actually that actually occur in confinement as well, oddly enough. But it just shows that even in confinement, you can't be perfectly biosecure. But those are the things that worry me a little bit about pasture, is just making sure that we're not getting our animals exposed to things that are spread by other species, just because they can come into contact. Yeah, they might be more likely to come into contact. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
I know there's a lot of great producers out there on pasture, and I know there's a lot of people that are very conscious about biosecurity and that sort of thing, and it can be done, no doubt. It's just I think you got to tighten up your boots a little bit more when you're raising them outside, basically.
Yeah, and I agree that's something that you kind of, from my perspective, kind of have to pick your battles. So having 100 acres of Appalachian mountains that I have very little control over the wildlife that comes on it, but I do make sure that if anybody has another pig operation, then if they're going to come on my property, then they're not allowed in my pasture. They change shoes, all that kind of stuff. And then, of course, just looking at we're a closed loop system, so we are fair to finish on our farm. So I'm not introducing new pigs in on a regular basis. So you're trying to keep those loops closed, but still have to bring in feed, and then of course can't manage the wildlife on that 100 acres. So
sure,
it sounds like obviously pros and cons on both setups as far as biosecurity goes.
But that's a great message for your listeners. Is it's important, and it's not, there are things you can do, and there are some things that are out of your control, but the things you can do are certainly effective. And it's great to have, honestly, it's great to have a podcast like this that reaches the demographic that you're talking to, because our food system is part of our national security, and we just have a robust and great food system, and we're all part of it. We're all in it together, no matter what we do. And so it's super that I'm excited that there's a podcast like this that reaches those folks out there, because it's important to get that message out. Yeah.
All right. Thank you. Well, let's do this if we could, because I want to give Paul an opportunity. I know he's just sitting on the edge of his seat, waiting to tell us about products. So I'd like to segue into that with something that, as we talked in pre-screening before we started recording, we talked about our audience here at the Pasture Pig Podcast. Ranges from the homesteader who's maybe raising just a couple hogs for themselves for personal consumption, all the way up to some substantially large commercial operators on pasture, and some pretty big breeders. I know we've got an audience throughout that country that breeds a lot of the heritage swine, of course, and then some more production type breeds. So I think of myself, I think back about 10 years ago when I first got pigs on property. I didn't know what the heck I was doing. And so when I first hear that word disease, you kind of get the cold sweats. It's like, what have I got to look for? What am I doing? What do I have to be prepared for? And trying to put together that med kit, that first sutures and blue coat and those type of things are the basic stuff. When you start getting into vaccinations and immunizations, it's like, oh my goodness, so what would you guys, from your perspective, what would you give advice, knowing that what our demographic is? What is the advice to say, okay, here's a list of 80 things you got to look for, or here's the top 5 or top 1? Where do you start when it comes to managing disease or controlling disease on a small farm operation?
Paul, I'll let you take a stab at that one, and then let me know if I can be of any assistance.
Okay. I think it doesn't matter what species. We're talking about swine here, but the biggest thing is to look how the pig is acting. Are they eating? Are they drinking? Do they look? Kind of have that twinkle in their eye, or that bright eyes. And some breeds are there. I have some sheep and cattle at home along with some pigs, and the sheep and cattle, are their ears drooping? Are they lethargic, not looking good? Those are just types of animal husbandry that go across different species that people need to look at and just be aware of how the animals are acting as you move through your pastures, move through your pens, to see how they're feeling, and that really gives you a good indication. Do they get up and come greet you? Are they running around playing with each other, or are they just have been laying around for the last couple of days, not acting like they're feeling the best? So those types of things are things that you can at least start to look at. We're in the lines of prevention. We do not have any antibiotics. We do not manufacture any of those. But we do have those at our disposal. So we don't want our animals to to be in pain or to be suffering of any kind. So we have those antibiotics available through the veterinary clinics to be able to help them get better. Just like if I got sick, I go to the doctor and get something to make me better. So, at least in my mind, those are things that are initially the first things off the off the truck that we're looking at every day, just to see how the animals are doing, and then start asking questions if those animals aren't looking the way they had the last couple days or months or weeks before.
Yeah, and I and to kind of build on that point, Troy. I mean, there's an awful lot of different things. There's a wide variety of diseases, and the other thing I've noticed is, there's so many different programs anymore in terms of antibiotics usage. I mean, there's some programs where you don't use antibiotics, or you're not allowed to. I don't know how much that affects the pasture raised, but it would seem to me that would be, like a Nyman Ranch type of an operation, things like that.
Right. Yeah.
Very sensitive to that, right? I mean, I don't know. That's the impression I get.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's good to work. I don't know. I don't know what anymore in rural America. We're getting less and less access to veterinary care, right? I mean, a lot of that is moving away, or the veterinarian's traveling further to get to see the herd that you might be there with. There are going to be, I think, some significant advances in telemedicine in terms of veterinary medicine. But I guess what I'm getting at is, it's good to work with a veterinarian if you can, I think, because a lot of the antibiotics anymore, even if you are able to use them, just the way that things have evolved with the FDA and the current environment we're in now, most of those things are on prescription anymore. We can't just walk into a store and buy a lot of these things anymore. And so it's good to work with a veterinarian. The other things, like out on just in general, I think outside, you got to watch. Mosquitoes are, they're notorious for spreading disease. And so draining of, stagnant water, wetlands, things like that can be helpful in any operation, cattle, swine, whatever it might be. And just making sure that there aren't any, sometimes the things, you see crazy things, but sometimes there's lead batteries laying around out in the pasture, things like that. The toxicity type things you aren't going to run into in a confinement,
right.
but you might run into it in, you see a pig with one pupil dilated and the other one constricted, something weird's going on,
right.
And so those are all things that are, sometimes those are almost forensic type investigations. You're trying to figure out what's going on by looking at the pig, but you've got, I don't know, you said you had several hundred acres out there. I mean, sometimes that's trying to find a needle in a haystack, but
right.
If you look at the pig, sometimes they'll tell you, what's going on. So yeah, the pasture situation presents a whole new kind of variety of things that can happen, kind of almost like a James Harriet sort of a scenario, all creatures great and small,
Right.
But it's also, I like I say, I've got a place in my heart for pasture raising, just because I think I'm nostalgic about it. It takes me back to the days when a lot of it was done that way. And so, and I think that's, some people prefer that as well in terms of, the source of their food. But yeah, if I could pinpoint something, I know I'm dancing around the question a little bit, but there's just such a wide variety of things that you could run into, that, it might be good for some of your listeners to, they might say, oh, no, there's a veterinarian for 100 miles or 200 miles, but with the telemedicine sort of thing that is probably going to come along, you might not have to do that anymore. You might be able to write a prescription without having to do that. So it might be good to keep that on your radar, and as those things develop, and that might be really helpful for your listeners.
Yeah, to be honest with you, I've been trying for, well, actually about 15 months to get a large animal vet who has pastured pig experience to come on, and I've yet to find one. Yeah, of course, it's kind of like, needle in a haystack situation too, because it's not like you can just Google large animal vet who has pastured pig experience and a whole bunch of options pop up. But yeah, that would be great. And my goodness, there's all kinds of things I'd like to unpack that you guys laid out there. But the idea of telemedicine with veterinarian medicine for large animals, just that excites me. I'm in that one of those deserts when it comes to large animal vets in general, but especially those that have any pig experience. I mean, easily 200, 300 miles from me.
Yeah.
So it becomes an issue there.
Yeah.
But yeah, that would be exciting to see telemedicine come in. But you'd mentioned something I think Paul had mentioned, and I think that's one advantage maybe that pastured pig operations have, is that observation of our swine, the daily contact, smaller herds usually, so they have the opportunity to interact with each pig, get a pretty good handle of your pasture, knowing what's what's where, even a certain type of plant that they're interacting with. So I find that interesting. And you mentioned contamination. That was something my farm, when I purchased it, was just absolutely gutted. So we hauled garbage out forever, and it seems like the pigs have a knack for finding things. So they'll unearth something that didn't realize. And it's like, oh, that's gotta be great.
For sure. They're curious. They are curious.
Yeah.
For sure.
But so I guess and maybe I'll just twist this question a little bit, and maybe this comes back to you, Paul. But as a pastured pork producer, I think when it was certain times of they're having conversation, be on these forums talking about things, people say, okay, you're going to farrow. You got to make sure you get Faro Sure Gold, and you got to give Faro Sure Gold every quarter, or whatever the case may be. You got to do this. These are the hard line things you got to do if you're going to do X, Y, Z with your pigs on pasture. So just obviously looking at the list of your guys' products, listing all the diseases that are out there that are potentials. I think maybe that's kind of the concern that some of us smaller operations have. Is like, where do you even begin? Do I literally just say, okay, I need every single thing that's on the list, and we just start poking, or obviously not poking, but letting the pigs be vaccinated with all of these things? Is there a logical order, or is it just go with what issues you've dealt with in the past?
Well, and I think you said it best earlier that you have a confined, closed system group of pigs that your diseases are going to be a lot different than say a 10,000 sow unit in the middle of Missouri. So there's that I think is where the veterinarian comes into play. Even if you don't have a large veterinarian with experience of pasture farrowing in your area, I think that's something that I'm gonna try to find that person to get on your podcast. But if we can get a veterinarian to visit with you, because each individual producer is going to be different. So sow products comparative are going to be needs are going to be different. We have pig shots, or more or less pig vaccines that are going through the water that I'd like to go over a few of those with us.
Sure.
That are very broad spectrum products. Like Han said, there are diseases that the pasture farrow producer is going to have issues with, that's the same as the large production producer is going to have the same with. So they're the products that we find are universal, and that's why we manufacture them, is because we want to make sure that we can help the small 2 or 3 sow producer along with the large producers as well.
Great. Yeah.
One of the products that we have is called nitroleiitis. It is our Lawsonia disease product. This is a product that, like Han says, all of our swine products go through the oral administration. So whether they go through the water lines or whether you drench the pigs, these are products that you can do that way. Our nitroleitis, the one big thing is it's a 4-month duration of immunity. So once that pig gets that vaccine into its body and that pig replicates that product to build up immunity, it has at least 4 months of immunity built into it. When we were doing our studies and trials to get this product licensed, we stopped at 4 months. I'm sure if we would have kept going and had those pigs go later than that, there still would have been immunity there. But just the sheer fact of pig growth cycle, 4 months should get it to the processing center, or being able to butcher it at that time. So Lithonia is an issue of the gut. It is a disease that will reduce the ability for absorption of nutrition from the feed that's coming into the pig. And this can be a disease that has clinical signs, or it can be a disease that might not show clinical signs, but you're actually not getting that pig to its optimum growth potential. So that is a product that we just launched about a year and a half ago, that has been very good, very well received in the industry. We're building more and more sales with that as we go through this year, last year, and moving into this year. That is a disease that the pasture production people will face. And like Hans says, the scours is another disease that is, again, doesn't matter who you are, you can get them. We have E. coli that can be catastrophic to either the pasture farrow or the production inside. We have 2 products that to fight the E. coli problem. We have a product called EdemaVac, and that is a product that helps fight the F18 E. coli out there. That is a disease that hits the pig young, usually late farrowing, early nursery. When those pigs get stressed, it helps the immune system. Once we get the vaccine in, it helps the immune system fight that stress and the F18 from coming in and creating havoc on the guts. And a lot of these pigs will die of dehydration just because they're not drinking, they're not feeling well. But if we can get the vaccine into them before they're challenged with F18 E. coli, that's been a great product for us, and a lot of producers are using that. The other E. coli product that we have right now is a product to help fight the K88 E. coli. That is something that we call our EnteroVac product. This is a product that is a freeze-dried product, along with the EdemaVac is also a freeze-dried product. That is something that people can store in the refrigerators. And once they rehydrate that product, they have to use it all up. But again, they can put it into the water line or drench the pigs as needed to help prevent them from the K88 disease getting in there and creating a lot of morbidity or mortality in those pigs.
Yeah.
So that's a product that's been useful.
Yeah. Okay. Excellent.
Yeah. 2 other ones that I'd like to go over, and then if you had any questions or if I've missed anything, please feel free to jump in. Hans was talking about erysipelas. That's a product that it can be in the soil. Is something that the pasture farrow people should be aware of. This is a product also is a freeze-dried product. Erysipelas is an issue that can cause damage in the gut. It is something that will have a lot of morbidity and mortality as well. This is a product that we vaccinate the pigs around 8 weeks of age or older, and this will also help in the prevention of E. coli, or excuse me, erysipelas.
Yeah.
Sorry
Okay.
about that.
Yeah.
Our last product we have is a salmonella product. And salmonella is something that we've seen, be a food grade safety issue. So salmonella is a product that is something that we like to be able to handle, especially in the pasture side, in the production side. We got a product called NitroSal. That is a product that either is freeze dried or we also have it in a frozen form. But the freeze dried can be stored in the refrigerator, and that is a product that helps in the reduction of mortality because of salmonella. That is something that, again, has been a good product for us. It comes in the reason, we have a need to have food safety, and salmonella is something that if we can keep that out of the pork and have a reduced food safety scare, those are things that we want to help with in the pork industry. And again, it's a water line or a drench type administration. This product can be injected, the freeze-dried product, but this is the only one of our products that is an injectable. This line of products has been very good for us. It is something, like Con says, it's a niche market. It's something that we're very proud of. Our nitroleitis and our NitroSal is used in and stored in freeze-dried, ultra-low frozen product. So it is actually a live product that is able to be thawed and then put into the pigs and replicate in their body. So that's just a little bit about our product. We're here to help, and we want to help your producers, and that's what we have right now.
Okay. So my question pops in my head, and this may be a dumb question, but as far as end users like us being able to access this product, is that exclusive through a veterinarian, or is this something we can buy direct from Arko Laboratories or some distributors?
We do go through distribution. Veterinarians are probably the easiest way to purchase this product for your producers. The distribution channels like MWI, AHI, those types of companies have our product for resale as well.
Okay. So in that situation, like if I was looking to get some NitroSal and say, okay, I've got, I want to vaccinate to 50 head, then I could just obviously reach out to one of those distributors, say, I need this product, this size, and that one you said, that one's freeze dried, so it can stay in a conventional freezer. So in that situation, I pick up the product, just keep it in the freezer until I'm ready to use it.
Correct.
Okay. Excellent. All right. Well, if I could then let's just push this a little bit further as far as the process goes, because I think this is where it's unique. I know in my mind, and I'm probably thinking the same as some people listening. So, the way we provide water to our swine on pasture, it varies greatly. So, some of us have closed systems, some of us have impoundments. So it's like you just walk up to the impoundment pig and you get your water. So looking at those type of things, it sounds like there's a drench application option. So if somebody had free choice water all over the farm, then they could look at drench. Or, of course, we could then look at doing confining the pigs for a little while, utilizing a closed water system, those type of things. So it sounds like, regardless of your watering process on pasture, these products could still be applicable.
Yeah, and one other thing, and Hans, correct me if I'm wrong, one thing that I was thinking of too, especially on smaller groups or groups that have, big water tanks that have continuous source of water all the time, it would be hard, if impossible, to vaccinate through that type of scenario. Could possibly be like almost like a gruel or some kind of a wet feed where you mix it into a smaller batch of really wet feed. Would that be a possibility to use as well, Hans?
Yeah, that's been done, and there's actually some really cool products coming out now that are made by another company, not us, but you can mix vaccines in with them, and then they're kind of these little chunks of they taste like I guess they taste really good. The pigs love it. They're kind of a it's called piggy gel is the one that just came out. And you mix it in, it solidifies, kind of like little jello crumbles, and the pigs really go after it. So we're looking into using vaccines that way as well, the oral vaccine. So we're more feeding it to the pigs than they are drinking it.
Yeah.
Paul's right. The main thing is just get it to the gut. Get it there one way or another. It doesn't really matter how we do it. If it gets in the gut, it's going to do its job. And so, yeah, there's been a lot of innovation, and just because there has been a lot of interest in, especially on baby pigs, even in confinement, so they're still on the sow. How do we get that vaccine to that pig without having to pick it up or squirt it in the mouth or whatever it might be? So there's a lot of cool new applications that are going to come out and are already out as well. There's another gel-based application where you can apply it to the underline while the little pigs are still in the sow, and then they love the taste of it. Same company makes that stuff, but you put it on there, the pigs get up to nurse, and then they taste that and they go after that. They turn all green, so you feel good that they got it, and because it's got a green dye in it. And so does these jello chunks, I guess they call them, this piggy gel. But I don't know if you have a website or anything that you put up, but we certainly can get you that information if people have interest in that.
Yeah, that'd be great. In fact, the Pastured Pig podcast website will be going live end of this week as we're recording. Okay. We could definitely share that information. Wow, you talked about niche. Okay. Talk about a niche market. So there's a compounding pharmacy basically for pigs. I love it.
Yeah. There you go.
That's great. Coming up with products.
And I've had a producer, do as little as, take your local bread out there and squirt a dose of vaccine onto a slice of bread and feed each individual pig.
Yeah.
These were sows in gestation, but it'd be the same concept.
Yeah, I mean,
that would fine.
I think all of us producers, smaller producers, that their medical budget maybe isn't something that's written down. It may just be what you can do type of thing. I think looking at those tools, just what tools are in the toolbox is what's really important. I know sometimes when I had to sedate my sow to inspect her hoof. She had a cracked hoof, and she's 700-pound sow, so. A loaf of bread and a 6-pack of Natty Light took care of that, so I could get her down and look at her.
Yeah.
So you kind of do what you got to do in a situation, but I'd love to have a resource of those type of tools that we could possibly utilize. Now you said one thing that I Paul, I think we need to kind of go back to and focus on, and that was looking at water. So if our listeners are thinking, okay, I want to use this. I've got a large water tank that the pigs use on a regular basis. I top it off from time to time. We want to look at there's specifics when it comes to algae growth, chlorinated water. There's kind of things there that could affect the efficacy of your vaccines in those type of water systems. Is that correct?
Correct. Yes, and those are things, especially the chlorinated water or the high mineral content water.
Mm-hmm.
We have a product called Stabilizer Plus Buffer that is a product that we use prior to getting the vaccine into, say they're in a conventional type setting where a person can use a doser, pulling the vaccine and water out of a bucket and dosing it into a water line. What we'll typically do is we'll put that Stabilizer Plus Buffer in that bucket of water prior to putting our vaccine in. And what that will do is help bind up the chlorine, bind up the heavy metals, so it doesn't do anything to hurt or change the vaccine in any way. So it also has a product in there, more or less a food for that living organism to live off of until it gets into that pig's gut to help help keep it to be a full dose versus having it die off too early before it gets into the pig's gut.
Yeah.
The other thing, the Plus Buffer that is on the vaccine, the Stabilizer, that is a product that it doesn't matter if your water pH level is really high or really low. What it'll do is it'll bring that pH back to an area, a range of where the vaccine likes to live. So that is something, it is used all over the United States. Water pH is totally different from your neck of the woods to our neck of the woods.
Right.
We're really high in iron here. And we have a lot of people using the chlorination, in the water systems. We want that, if you're using a chlorinator to be turned off, the time of administration. But the Stabilizer is something that's needed as well, just to help with the safety and the longevity of that vaccine as it goes through the water system.
Yeah. All right. Well, very good. Very good. I've kind of exhausted my list of questions there. Do you guys have any closing comments? Anything that you'd like to point out that we didn't cover before we wrap up?
Well, I think I just as kind of just a final comment. Again, thanks for having us on. We really appreciate it, and really interested in any feedback you'd have from your listeners. And also, we'd love to provide any information we can on the website. On the new website. One of the things that I think just to kind of round back to the gut again, you asked about that earlier. Mm-hmm. There's been a tremendous amount of research now in humans and in animals about what's called the microbiome, which is just the gamish of the gut. There's just a ton of stuff swimming around in our guts and pigs' guts. There's lots of bacteria. It's a biome. It's a community of organisms basically. And what they're finding is that the makeup of that biome is very critical to health. We hear a lot about probiotics, things like that, but and that's part of that as well. But Paul had alluded to the fact that sometimes these pigs don't have outward disease, but they can have very, very severe what we call subclinical disease. So what we see in E. coli is we can give a pig a low dose of E. coli, a disease-causing E. coli, not the vaccine, and their growth rates are significantly decreased, but they don't really show any signs. And I mean, it's kind of like when you or I, we can feel like crap, but we don't necessarily show any outward signs of it other than maybe we feel a little sluggish. But pigs have that same sort of a thing, and a lot of that goes back to how what's going on in the gut. And so a lot of these vaccines that are given in the gut, especially our line of vaccines, because that's all we make for the most part, they're really, they're targeted at preventing outward signs of disease, mostly death loss and things like that. But that pig, there's a lot going on in that gut, and these products are part of that solution to making that gut feel better. And if your gut feels good, the body isn't, because of, we're not tying up resources to fight things off, or if we don't have inflammation, things like that cause problems, there's less stress on that pig, and they're less likely to get sick, probably from a lot of other things. Yeah. And so really the underlying, this is one of the reasons a lot of people give these products on a regular basis regardless, just because there is so much research now that shows how critical gut health is to both humans and animals. And so I just leave you with that thought, because I think that's an important thing, regardless of whether we're raising pigs indoors, on pasture, in outer space, wherever it might be. But I think that really is a benefit to these things, and they're really not that expensive compared to what you get back out of them. So prevention, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, and I think that's really that's really relevant to pig health.
Yeah, I think that's a key point you made there, that I think that's something we that raise pigs on pasture need to think about. When we get those hanging weights, or we look at that feed conversion, we think, okay, that was kind of poor. So I think, I can't speak for all of us, but my first knee jerk would be, okay, there's, the breed line, maybe this sow's time to retire. She's not producing a good litter, or there's something with a boar. There's something genetic there that maybe needs to be called, or needs to be, new genetics need to be introduced. But it could really just be, like you said, gut health, that there's not good absorption simply because the gut biome's all messed up. And that's not as easy to test or to look for. I know when I started 2 years ago, started soaking and fermenting all of my feed, that I got better feed conversion through absorption. But also knowing that there is some microbiology, some microorganisms going on there in that oh my goodness, in that feed process, what we're doing with the fermenting, that it's creating some things there. And so I think that's something we all need to think about and consider when it comes to looking at it. It's like, if we're just not getting those numbers we expected, and maybe it just changed overnight, or it changed from one litter to the next, that's something to consider. Yeah, a lot of these things are really pervasive. They're everywhere. Erysipelas, what the research has found is 50% of pigs carry erysipelas, and we don't always see the outward signs of it. But when conditions become right, then it becomes, a kind of a train wreck. Whereas we're having pigs die when they're 3 weeks away from market, and then we got to treat them all with penicillin. We got to move back marketing dates. It's just it can be a problem, but it does go to show you that these things are there, and sometimes they're there and you don't see them. Yeah. But they are somewhat of an opportunist. So, I appreciate your experience with that too. Excellent. All right. Well, as we wrap up here, if people want to know more, if our listeners want to know more about Arko Laboratories, where can they find information about you guys?
Yeah, they can go to arkolabs.com. Okay. Would be a great place to start and look at the products and be able to email us, and our phone number's on there as well.
Okay. Do y'all have any social media presence or anything like that right now?
Not at this time, no.
Okay. Yeah. So I'll put that link down in our show notes there, so you guys can check that out if you're interested. And looking at the website, there is product description and even PDFs that you can download that detail the products and administering details, those type of things as well. Well, gentlemen, I really appreciate you taking the time. I know we've gone a little long here. I usually try to stay under an hour. We're a cat's whisker over that, but I appreciate you guys coming on the podcast and sharing your information with us. It was a very different conversation, but I'm really glad we had it. I think we're kind of plowing new ground here on the podcast.
Thank you.
Great.
For having
Thank
us.
you very much, Troy.
All right, well, I'm going to let you all go. I pray you have a good evening, and we'll talk to you all soon.
Well, all right. I really appreciate them coming on the podcast and bringing a new perspective, a new topic that we really hadn't gotten into. And man, would I love to do deeper dives into this type of stuff. So if you all know of an organization, a leader in this field of whatever it may be associated with pastured pigs, reach out to me and let me know, and I will try to contact them to see if they can come on the podcast. Yeah, I'd love to get equipment suppliers, feed producers, anything to do with the medical, the vet side of pastured pigs, I think would be very interesting and hopefully add some additional perspective there. So let me know if you've got some ideas there. Again, just go to the pasturedpig.com website, and you can use a contact form to drop some of that information in. All right, well, I appreciate everybody listening. Anxious to get some more of these interviews out. I've had a decent run of interviews we've done in the last 30 days. But if you'd like to be on the podcast, and all you got to do is just reach out, use the contact form on the website, do a little bit of pre-screening info, and I'll reach out to you and we'll get something scheduled. Really, again, love talking with you all and getting additional perspectives and listening how you all have your farm set up. Don't forget Patreon. If you want to help support this effort and keep us moving, then check out the Patreon. There'll be a link in the show description there, and you can support us and help us keep this going. All right, take care, everybody.
We hope you have enjoyed this episode of the Pastured Pig Podcast. To learn more about our podcast or to submit topics or recommend guests for future episodes, visit redtoolhouse.com.